I forgot how I was usually starting out these portions of the evening. We have to have a moment of silence. Seinfeld is over. I said silence! There, wasn't that more interesting and entertaining than watching Seinfeld? Anyway, this is the portion of the show, speaking of Seinfeld, where we talk about censorship. And this time, I'm probably not going to go so much into the Tipper Gores of the world, because to me, they're not nearly as big a censorship problem right now as Disney, Time Warner, Rupert Murdoch, and the way they deliberately omit stories and facts out of the news about events that actually affect people's lives that people might want to know about and stuff, and instead get everybody focused on, what are we going to do without Seinfeld? All those propaganda mags and People Magazine and Entertainment Weekly, as if you can tell them apart at this point, between Time and Newspeak, all in 1 week. The same thing was on the cover. What'll we do without Seinfeld? This is their idea of a national crisis, to sort of distract people from the real ones. What is presented as food for thought are things like this article I got out of the Sunday Comical Examiner a while back, written by a kind of yuppie soccer momish columnist named Joan Ryan, whose qualifications for writing on the editorial page are that she's a successful sports writer. The picture with the column shows a male hand pointing a handgun at a radio. And the title is, "Whiners and Gripers, You May Take a Back Seat." This is the Thanksgiving column, no less. Once a year, says Joan Ryan, we can use the pause button and blot out the moans of the victimized in our culture, celebrating instead all we hold dear. Quote, clearly no country is more in need of the Thanksgiving holiday than we. Guess she never went to Rwanda. For 1 day a year, we give the complaining a rest and acknowledge that life isn't so horribly wretched. In that spirit, I have compiled a list of things for which I am thankful. Electric blankets. Towels from the dryer. Steve Young. Wide padded bicycle seats. Helen Hunt. Free valet parking. Refunds. Any movie with Harrison Ford. Credit card gas pumps. The X-Files. Parking meters with time left. There, I feel calm and satisfied already. This is what passes for journalism and editorial discourse in the newspapers we are supposed to believe are accurate reflections of public record. This is an example of how the national entertainment state wants the rest of us to think or not to think, depending on your point of view. I'm tired of hearing about those homeless people. I'm suffering from compassion burnout. I'd much rather have hot towels from the dryer and a Harrison Ford movie and be thankful for the good things in life. You know, they all say, like this Marie Antoinette columnist here, you know, the yuppie soccer mom from hell and all who sail with them. Don't worry, be greedy. The economy is booming. It says so in the Wall Street Journal and the USA Today. The economy must be booming. See, everything's all better again. For who? Well, Even though the Marie Antoinette-ish columnist says we should forget about the whiners and gripers today, as of Thanksgiving in 1997, 2.1 million people in the most powerful country in the world are homeless. And the food banks are already strained to the breaking point, and we haven't even really hit the full brunt of the welfare cuts yet. Government estimation, along with Columbia University, in a study, they said that they think now 22% of American kids are growing up poor, and 6.1 million of them are growing up hungry. And slashing all the benefits for the kids and the poor and the homeless, the budget for welfare is only 3% of the national budget, and that's what they chose to slash so they can cut taxes for the rich. That's their real, in-practice definition of family values. What amazes me about how mean-spirited it's been, we've got to balance the budget on the backs of the poor, never mind that Ross Perot or Michael Jordan or Bill Gates could balance the budget as if we need to balance the budget in the first place. Of course, one of the people wanting to take credit for this is our beloved President Clinton, or should, in this case, we say the Clinton-Gingrich regime, or whatever. Last August proudly proclaimed that welfare reform must be a success because 1.4 million people on the welfare rolls are gone. Gone where? Another 1.9 million are quote-unquote gone since Clinton first took office, and I think we can figure out where some of them have gone just by looking at how many people are sleeping on Haight Street, Market Street, Castro Street, neighborhood streets, you name it. That's where they have gone. But another one of the solutions is what they're calling workfare. Get a fucking job. We're not going to give you any more handouts. I mean, this was the message delivered among other people to, according to the Progressive, an estimated 330,000 kids in wheelchairs got their benefits cut off by the family values mob and their welfare reform. And of course, they want women to be at home taking care of their children, but in order to get any sort of aid for them at all, they have to get a job and not be home to take care of your children. Often, these are workfare jobs, which is creating a sub-minimum wage slave class in this country, designed to drive down the real wages and, of course, replace high-paid union workers with, shall we say, volunteers or whatever. In other words, you work that or you get the rest of your payments cut off. So people who have to go out and find jobs to get their payments are quitting school en masse to do it too. The City University in New York City estimated that they're losing 13,000 students just at that school for people who had to go get workfare jobs instead. And a welfare official in New York City, when asked about this, said, well, what good is school going to do them anyway? Yeah. In Baltimore, their Health and Human Services Department estimated that 17,000 people will now be coming on the job market because their welfare payments got cut off, and the state of Maryland responded with 66 new job openings. Where are these people going to go? One way to solve this would be to reduce everybody to a 30-hour week at the same wages, since after all, you read the Wall Street Journal or Fortune or Forbes, and profits are booming for corporations. They can afford to pay you 40-hour worth of wages for 30 hours of work, and then somebody else could do the rest of the job and also get paid. But instead, we have things like the Bay Guardian's report that cops in Vallejo, California, are now raiding people's apartments and projects and tearing them apart for people suspected of being welfare cheats, including an old lady or two. Immigrants, under the new rules, if they get picked up for something or apply for any kind of benefit whatsoever or get caught in the net, they can be deported for small crimes that happened 25 years ago, or at least held in detention until they can find somebody to try and get them out, which most of the time doesn't work that way. In order to keep this kind of blatant cruelty and fascism going and people to not start asking too many questions, you have to direct their attention elsewhere by demonizing and criminalizing the very underclass that you're throwing out in the street. And we've seen repeated bashing of black women who have children, the subtle message, of course, being that all poverty would magically go away if people of that skin color would quit having so many babies. You hear that in veiled terms so much. It's the fault of the moms, but especially it's the fault of their kids. If you believe what you see on TV or read in the San Francisco Chronicle or whatever, you'd think that there was gang violence going on outside and inside this room. Youth, they've always been bad, and now they're getting worse and worse and worse. People like William Bennett, who I will get to a little later, have coined a term for this new generation of youth. It's a bird, it's a plane, it's a drive-by, it's super predators. They're everywhere! The sky is falling! Super predators! Here in a church with mostly white faces, there may not be too many super predators, but you can feel them out there, can't you? You can just feel them. They're 14 years old and they already know how to fire a gun and to steal and to hotwire a car and smoke crack and this, that, and the other. These goddamn kids, you never know what they'll do next. We gotta lock up these poor kids because they're unsightly on street corners. They drive down the property values and things like that. Super predators. At a time when in reality, even the government's own statistics show crime, including violent crime in all categories, has steadily been going down. Even juvenile crime has been going down. And also what's interesting is when they start trying to blame the cause of super predators on everything except how screwed up our economic system is and people in the inner cities don't get good educations and cutting off people's benefits and everything. Oh, it must be Marilyn Manson's fault. Oh, it must be Snoop Doggy Dogg's fault. Oh, it must be sexually explicit television's fault or something. Even though European and Japanese kids, for example, see a lot of the same violent TV shows people do in this country, but their crime rate isn't nearly what ours is, and there is no talk of an onslaught of wicked super predators or anything like that. And meanwhile, since 1986, the reports of child abuse in this country have multiplied by a factor of 4. But are there really super predators, or is this just another way of trying to bash people, divide them, classify, cage, you name it? In the 50s, there was the Red Scare, and if you wanted to go after somebody, you could name them a suspected communist and get them kicked out of their job and this, that, and the other. Now, through the same tactics, there's a new category, suspected gang member. Besides trashing affirmative action and this new banning bilingual education move they're having in California and things like that, another way of resegregating the country in a most fascistic way is just start labeling people suspected gang members and stigmatizing them accordingly. For example, in Denver, the Denver police, on their list of suspected gang members, it includes 2 out of 3 black kids in Denver. Have all somehow made the list, with hardly any white ones on the list at all. In Orange County, they have 20,000 people on the suspected gang member list, 9,000 of whom have never been arrested. But they don't just include youth on it. A 38-year-old Mexican mother of 4 has reported being stopped repeatedly in Orange County for being a suspected gang member and pulled out of her car and frisked and detained, most likely because of the color of her skin and her Spanish last name. You know, you don't need the white hood anymore if you've got a cop's uniform on and you can label anybody you want a suspected gang member. And these suspected gang member lists are going to the FBI. They're also being circulated among landlords. Where in Aurora, Colorado, for example, a suburb of Denver, there's been documented cases of single fathers who want to be a part of their children's lives being forbidden to see them, lest the child's mother and the child be kicked out of a public housing project for associating with a suspected gang member. And once you're guilty of being a suspected gang member on somebody's list, it's very hard to get off that list or figure out how far it has gone. The LA Sheriff's Department's list has 47% of the black men in the LA County ages 21 to 24. And again, people are repeatedly stopped, as they are in other cities where this goes on. And sometimes it's a question of shoot first and ask questions later. The most recent case that actually got some publicity was a college-bound high school senior who just happened to be black, was walking in Times Square in New York City, and a cop gunned him down for flashing a silver object, the wrapper to a Three Musketeers bar, which he was about to eat. And he survived, but I would guess is probably going to sue New York's ass off for that. But the sick part is that San Francisco, among others, allots 1, 2, maybe more millions of dollars in the city budget every year for paying out police brutality claims. They'd rather spend millions paying off brutality victims than reform the police department. Another ask questions later policy that's real scary is in Indianapolis, suspected crack house, the cops just come and bulldoze the house. Kind of like the way the Israelis bulldoze Palestinians' houses or something like that. It's happening here now. That's the kind of climate that labeling people suspected gang members and having everybody assume that somebody of a different skin color must be some super predator who's going to shoot you and is high out of their mind on crack or whatever. Another way of resegregating that's been happening in New York City and they're proposing for Union Square in San Francisco is what they call business improvement districts, where they sort of cordon off with unseen walls a selected area or neighborhood so they can gentrify it, and to keep undesirable elements like wrong skin color or homeless or not yuppie dressed up enough out of the area, they hire their own private police forces to keep everything nice and clean, which they want to do for the hotels and the shopping areas around Macy's and Union Square downtown. I mean, all of this, in a way, it kind of reeks as a subtle Cold War or even Civil War being fought in this country, waged aggressively by the haves against the have-nots. And knowing hell to pay, the people on the higher income bracket are then, out of fear of the wicked super predators or whatever, you'll see the growth of so-called gated communities, an oxymoron if I've ever heard one. And more people buying these gigantic four-wheel drive so-called sport utility vehicles to protect them from all kinds of predators or what. Don't get no Cadillac. That's just some grandpa car. We got a big old four-wheeler that guzzles even more gas than a Cadillac does, costs twice as much, and get a big old rhino bumper on the front. So just in case soccer mom from hell is going down to pick up her precious artifact child from school or whatever, if she spots some super predator near the child after the child's in the truck, which just happens to be some kid on the playground waving goodbye to their friend or something, ooh, suspected gang member, mow them down. Have you noticed how people who drive those yuppie Cadillacs in this town, they don't drive them very well? They think because they've got this big, tough rhino bumper vehicle, they can drive down the middle of two-way streets. Stop signs do not apply to them. And in Colorado, where I'm originally from, it somehow makes them invincible to ice and snow on windy mountain roads. The accident rate has gone up accordingly with people like this. And thankfully, what is it, only about 1 in 10 people who own those things ever take them off the road? I mean, just imagine what the woods would look like if they all took them off the road or whatever. I mean, maybe some gulches would be filled up with these hulks for archaeologists to dig up later. And another way of waging war against the have-nots is to attack their spokespeople, their messengers, their artists, their musicians, through things like the infamous tipper sticker, the parental advisory notice, whose victims are disproportionately black artists And how this figures in a tool of segregation is that many chain stores like Walmart or Kmart will not carry any product with a tipper sticker on it. And of course, this also leads to a lot of censorship behind the scenes that we never even hear about, with major label fat cats up in the offices making artists take songs off their albums that might get them a tipper sticker because they don't want to offend Walmart or whatever, or issuing special dumbed down editions of some albums exclusively for Walmart, such as the version of Nirvana in Utero that the band foolishly agreed to, which got rid of the fetuses on the back and changed the title of Rape Me to Waif Me, whatever that means. And White Zombie has had this done to them. And does anybody know I think she's a country or bluegrass or acoustic folk female artist who had the album cover with the pill capsule breaking over a town at night and sprinkling little snowflakes down on it? Can't remember who it is. No, definitely not, no. Ironically, here you go. Alanis Morissette has all kinds of swear words on her album. No tipper sticker. She's white, and they put a lot of money into her jagged little sales and everything. But if she were black, you'd never see her in Walmart, that's for sure. Anyway, the album with the pill breaking over a town, which was meant as a comment against Prozac, was banned from Walmart for being pro-drug. So they changed the cover just for Walmart. What's that? She's white, yeah. Sheryl Crow's last album was banned from Walmart because it had a song attacking Walmart on it. Walmart justifies this in-house censorship, saying they're trying to protect innocent, fragile eggshell minds from explicit sex and violence. Yet the song about Walmart on Sheryl Crow's album, and I feel weird defending the very existence of Sheryl Crow, but I must in this case. It was a song attacking Walmart for selling guns to people in their department store, and they banned it, which means you cannot buy an album that mentions guns, but you can trot across the store and buy the actual gun and shoot people with it. Again, family values on parade. But now there's a new movement to start slapping tipper stickers or a movie-style rating system on live shows. There's a bill in the state legislature in Michigan. One has popped up in Georgia. Another is going to pop up pretty soon in South Carolina. And this is yet another pungent example of how America is slowly turning into the Soviet Union. You remember, in the Soviet Union, you used to have to audition for government censor boards if you were going to play music in front of other people. You had to be certified professional by the government censors, or you were not allowed to play anywhere. And this was in Czechoslovakia and East Germany and other countries, Poland as well, I believe. And that's what this bill would do to America, where they would appoint censorship boards. And can you imagine the kind of people Pete Wilson or Bill Clinton would appoint to censorship boards like this? Just imagine if Al Gore was in charge of appointing the censorship boards. And then you would have to audition for these people or they wouldn't let you play anywhere. In a way, it's a monopolistic big-time promoter Bill Graham wet dream come true, because that way there could only be big, safe, corporate major label shows, because the Board of Censorship is too busy to have to listen to every little punk band that wants to play at Gilman Street or something. They don't have time for that. It would just be much easier if those bands didn't play and weren't allowed to exist. That's what this kind of a rating system could lead to. Plus, how are you supposed to know from night to night what somebody is going to do in a live performance? There were a few Dead Kennedy shows where the audience was kind, ho-ho, enough to tear my pants off. Did that make me an X-rated performer by default or not? Thankfully, there were no boards of censorships to find out. And luckily, some of the bigger acts like Pearl Jam and REM and even No Doubt have announced that they will not play in any state that passes a concert rating law. And the excuse they're using, the reason they're citing that America needs these live show censorship laws is, of course, your friend and mine, Marilyn Manson. Ooh. Ooh. Now, I have to admit, I'm a little bit jealous of the guy. I mean, can you imagine what I would give to be able to tie up entire state legislatures in North Carolina and New Jersey, tie up Utah as well, have them arguing back and forth on company time on whether to ban my ass from their nice, clean state venues, thus wasting that many days of potential bribe taking and passing corrupt laws and... In South Carolina, thanks to a Christian coalition puppet who was running for office, Marilyn Manson was paid $40,000 by the University of South Carolina not to play. Nice work if you can get it. Number 2 target in the live arena lately has been Rage Against the Machine, where police departments have been circulating memos to other police and sheriff's departments all along their last tour's route, trying to get the cops to forcibly shut their shows down, claiming they promote cop killing and they're anti-law and order and things like that. In Texas, a bill was passed and gleefully signed into law by George Bush's son, George W. Bush, or George W, if you call in Texasese. They forbid state institutions to own stock in any company that traffics in anything immoral or obscene. And their target in this case was forcing the University of Texas to withdraw millions of dollars in stock money from the Seagram's liquor empire because they now own MCA. They bought it from Matsushita, and MCA distributes Interscope, home of Marilyn Manson, Death Row Records, Tupac Shakur, Snoop Doggy Dogg, Dr. Dre, etc., etc. This attempt being to bully Seagram's into dropping Interscope in hopes that they won't be able to find another distributor. They just had this bill in the California state legislature to try and limit state institutions from investing their pension money in any corporation that traffics in wicked, violent, illegal music or something. And of course they trotted out some old guy whose kid had just killed themselves, and 13-year-old dropped out of stool, alcoholic, but no, he blamed it on the music. Marilyn Manson, the Sex Pistols, and Dead Kennedys. I finally did it! Finally got one! Eat your heart out, Bad Religion. And if that's not enough, we have had anti-music hearings in the Senate once again. They didn't make the headlines as big as the Tipper hearings in 1985 because they went by so quickly. In a way, the people who staged this one were smart. Instead of having day after day of testimony until Frank Zappa and even John Denver showed up to testify against the censorship proposals of Tipper and her friends, this time, the hearings were only 2 hours long, and no one from the artistic community was allowed to testify. Chuck D was ready to testify. I'd been approached, but I wrote back the person trying to get me there saying, yeah, I'll bet you they're not going to let me in, aren't they? And sure enough, they didn't let anybody like that in. Michael Eric Dyson of Hip Hop Confidential was also not allowed to speak. Instead, it was a roll call of the usual suspects. Senator Joseph Lieberman of Connecticut, an extreme right-wing Democrat who's been for banning all kinds of things since he got into office, not only sat on the committee, but hopped across the room and testified on his behalf as well. interrupted all the other witnesses to pontificate on his views on the subject, all of which were pretty toxic, as you might guess. And sure enough, they dug up somebody from North Dakota who testified about how Marilyn Manson caused his child to kill himself in his bedroom because the Antichrist Superstar CD just happened to be in the stereo when the kid was found dead. Also, they had one of the more prominent music bashers as of late, the Clarence Thomas of the Tipper world, C. Dolores Tucker of the National Political Congress of Black Women, who at times has even waged an Operation Rescue level campaign against rap music, including such rap bands, at least according to her, as Nine Inch Nails, blocking the entrance to stores in Washington, D.C. to keep people from going in and buying albums and things like that. She has a powerful ally, namely William Bennett. They were introduced to each other by Barbara Wyatt, who is the current president of, yes, the Parents Music Resource Center. Tipper's organization flies below the radar screen, and Tipper doesn't have to go out and do the dirty work herself anymore, but they are still very much alive, networking demagogues with each other. William Bennett, you may recall, was George Bush's drug czar. The one who, when he first assumed power, said that within 2 years there will be no vacancy in any prison in the United States. He also called for public beheading of convicted drug dealers and for making every resident of Washington, D.C. carry a pass, South African style, and for rounding up all youth suspected of using drugs in Washington, D.C. and locking them up on barges in the Potomac River. Now the corporate media paints him as this arbiter of our virtues and this great moralist we all have to listen to and buy his allegedly best-selling book and all that. And together, he and Tucker make quite a powerful team. The National Political Congress of Black Women goes back far enough in time that she has the ear of people like the NAACP, who have supported her, without, of course, getting the other side of the story. And she and Bennett were able to raid a board meeting of the Time Warner Empire and bully them into dropping Interscope before MCA picked him up, and are now trying to get MCA to do the same thing, as well as marching into, I believe it's who distributes the Maverick label, to object to the new Prodigy single, and this time Tucker was accompanied by none other than Gloria Steinem, who she now successfully hoodwinked into joining the music-bashing censorship empire. And like William Bennett, the deeper you dig into the background of C. Dolores Tucker, the worse she smells. As far back as 1966, the Philadelphia Inquirer named her one of the city's 10 worst slumlords. Later, she was still able to become Commonwealth Secretary of the state of Pennsylvania, where she had staff members write speeches for her, for which she pocketed over $65,000 in honorariums. Pennsylvania Governor Milton Shapp finally fired her for misuse of public office in 1977. But her tactics continue like this to this day. According to Rock and Rap Confidential, both Interscope and Death Row Records filed suit against her in late 1995 for attempting an extortion job whereby Death Row Records would be turned over to her control. And among the threats that came towards Suge Knight through her attorney was that if he didn't agree to this and knuckle under to Tucker, he would spend the rest of his life in jail. Suge Knight is now in jail. Also, after this Senate hearing, when Michael Eric Dyson was rebutting Tucker's testimony before the committee outside in the hallway to the press, since he wasn't allowed to testify himself, Tucker's husband pushed his way through the crowd and told him, and this was caught on film apparently, next time you show up here, you better bring an extra pair of glasses because you're going to need one. This is the way the Tuckers operate. Dolores Tucker is also suing the estate of Tupac Shakur, among other people, claiming that the lyrics on his All Eyes on Me album ruined her sex life. And she then filed suit against Newsweek magazine for printing a little article about the first lawsuit against Tupac. I mean, she plays very, very, very dirty, and in some ways is a more heavy-handed gangsta than any of her targets. Meanwhile, the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences, otherwise known as NARAS, sponsor of the Grammy Awards, their head, Michael Green, who at one time was a vocal and articulate opponent of Tipper Gore and record ratings, is now claiming that there's too many drugs in the music industry and proposing piss testing musicians for drugs. And suspending contracts of major label artists for drugs and deducting the costs of forced rehab from their royalties. Of course, no mention of coke-addled executives up in the major label offices or people with all their pro-drunk driving and wife-beating songs down in Nashville. That doesn't seem to be a problem. Admittedly, I too think there has been a drug problem in the music industry, and I kind of wonder where all the drugs keep popping up as soon as any youth culture gets too strong. I also wonder why it is that so many people I've known personally who've been in bands who've signed to major labels wind up coming out the other end hooked on junk. You know, it's almost as though a chemical per diem is a great way to keep your artists under control. Here you can't have any more dope till you do this video, this interview, this tour, and you have to be here at this date, and you have to be here at that date, and you can't talk to any more of your old friends, blah, 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 blah. It's a way of controlling the artist when management and attorney and major labels control all the purse strings. I think most damaging of all these attacks on music was partly perpetrated by a couple of short-sighted heavy metal labels themselves. In North Eugene, Oregon, there was an armed robbery of a convenience store where 4 guys came in and beat the clerk to death and almost beat the other clerk to death. She responded by suing Cannibal Corpse, Deicide, Roadrunner Records, and Metal Blade Records for damages, claiming the music caused these kids to do these things. And rather than fight this thing through court and get it thrown out, Metal Blade and Roadrunner decided they'd save themselves some legal bills and settle out of court and pay her. Now there is a legal precedent that other people can use in other states to sue bands saying, see, these bands and these labels admitted this music causes people to commit violent crimes, therefore we can sue you or arrest you. That was an incredibly dumb thing to do on the part of Roadrunner and Metal Blade, and may they burn in hell for it. In other places in the world, it's getting as bad or worse. In France, a rapper is now doing jail time for dissing the police. In Brazil, the people in a band called Planet Hemp were dragged off the stage by the cops in front of 7,000 people for advocating the use of marijuana, which carries a mandatory 3 to 15 years in jail in Brazil, no parole or anything, no bail either. The singer for Sponge got arrested for saying naughty words on stage in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And the rapper, you may know about Sibo up in Sacramento, who had his parole revoked and he got put back in the state prison system after he put out an album dissing the police. Meanwhile, the lead prosecutor in the case against me, clear back in '87 before they went after Two Live Crew or anything, admitted last year in an interview with the Washington Post that he regretted the whole thing, that he thought it was a mistake, that it never should have happened, and we were just a bunch of prima donna prosecutors, et cetera, which I want to shove that in the face of everybody else who keeps trying to make political hay for themselves by busting musicians or comic book stores or pirate radio or what have you. I mean, for that matter, who's more harmful, Tupac Shakur, Snoop Dogg, or Jerry Springer? That is the closest thing I've seen yet to a Roman gladiator show on TV. Forget gangsta rap. What about gangsta talk show hosts? I seriously wonder if they screen all the people who want to be on that show for length of arrest record. The longer, the better. And then they sprinkle crack on all the week-old croissants in the dressing room or something. Where now, every night, people tear each other's hair out, punch the hell out of each other. Jerry is planted way back in the audience so they never beat the shit out of him like we all wish they would. Well, the audience, like... And then the audience goes, Jerry, Jerry, Jerry. Whenever people start punching the shit out of each other, they're all going, Jerry, Jerry, Jerry. The worst one I saw, I blundered into one where a woman who was born with no hands and no feet was sitting helplessly in a chair crying while the audience booed her for arguing that she had a right to be loved and have a boyfriend. That was sick. That was sick. But you can always relieve yourself because then Jenny Jones comes on right afterwards and makes up all the little goth chicks into normal women and stuff so their mothers approve. There's one I saw where the goth girl was practically in tears when they brought her back out as a little cutie. It was like, I look like a Spice Girl. Jenny Jones. Is that so bad? And of course, they often have to have enough plastic surgery people and whatnot to have lots of bouncing big tits every other show on that one, too. People beat each other up on Jerry Springer, then you see the tits, and that's what counts for dialogue. Yeah, I mean, they say kids have no values. What about adults having no values? Who are the real super predators? Newt, Pete Wilson, Willie Brown, or better yet, how about these corporate executives who pay themselves tens of millions of dollars in bonuses while they rip apart families' lives by laying off thousands and thousands of people? And it's well documented that in areas where there's massive layoffs, the child abuse and spousal battery rate goes way, way, way up. So much for family values. I mean, that was definitely what I would call super predators. For example, this Levi's executive, Tom Tusher, it was reported an article in the San Francisco Chronicle, or maybe the Examiner, maybe both, no less, of getting a $100 million bonus, while in the same article they mentioned Levi just laid off about 6,400 people in Texas because they're moving the plant thanks to the NAFTA treaty and all. I think another good candidate for super predators would be these giant HMO corporations taking over and buying up hospitals and turning them into for-profit institutions where if you're really, really, really sick or terminally ill, they'll refuse to treat you because it might cost them too much insurance money. Woman just had a baby, get them back out the door. We don't want to have to pay any more insurance money for that. Surgery is literally slice and dice in a case like this. The worst example I've heard lately of taking advantage of sick people for profit, keeping in mind other countries in the industrialized world put health care and family care as a very big priority in their national budget, but not in this country. A friend of mine who overcame a really horrible drug problem was then told that all the heroin he did had created a disease in the gums of his mouth, and the only way he was ever going to be able to save his mouth was to have all his teeth pulled over a 2-year period for a mere $20,000. He figured maybe one of the things he should do is get the hell out of America to clear his head, and he went to Amsterdam, where, with no question asked, they issued him a health card so he could see a doctor without having to go through one referral and another referral and insurance forms and all this bullshit. Where they looked at his gums, gave him an antibiotic, and bingo, all the germs were gone and his teeth are fine. And that is an example of super predators in our healthcare system. Corporations are running amok as super predators. Nike pays people 20 cents an hour in Vietnam to make those lovely $200 tennis shoes, and Disney pays people 30 cents in Haiti for some of their products. And as more and more of these jobs are moved overseas so they can pay slave wages, if that, believe it or not, it's still legal in this country, whereby if you ship your company's plant overseas and throw a bunch of people out of work, it's a tax write-off. It is beneficial tax-wise to throw people out of work in this country. Wall Street loves it too, of course. Stock goes way up if you throw people out of work. And the person who dates back to Nixon and Gerald Ford days, who Clinton reappointed as head of the Federal Reserve Board, and thus possibly one of the most powerful people in this country, Alan Greenspan, has said that 8 million unemployed in America is essential for a healthy economy. Also, the other things that you can write off on your taxes if you're a corporation is you can write off $100 million bonuses to chief executives and their giant salaries, and you can even write off anti-pollution fines. And meanwhile, even though more and more people are being thrown out on the street from welfare cuts, corporate welfare is alive and well. Last year, we spent $100 million subsidizing M&M's, McDonald's, and Campbell's Soup, among other companies, in efforts to open markets overseas, which is chicken feed compared to the $7.6 billion spent to subsidize arms manufacturers trying to sell weapons that kill people overseas. In this light, somebody like Newt Gingrich is merely a sideshow. You know, he makes a great cartoon character to throw darts at. I mean, he even looks like a pig. And his contract on America, when they were starting to try to implement those ideas, they invited the robber barons and the corporate lobbyists directly into congressional committee rooms to write the laws for them to gut all the anti-pollution regulations and labor safety and capital gains tax laws and things like that. Admittedly, I kind of liked his orphanage proposal. He just got the target wrong. You remember why he wanted to take all poor kids, mainly minority kids? William Bennett started this idea, by the way, and lock them up in orphanages and then provide no government money to run them. But maybe what we need to stop these real super predators is to take rich kids from their families and put them in orphanages so they have to grow up around real people and experience real things instead of prep schools, tennis lessons, and the stock market. I mean, in a way, Newt and his Newtsies serve... Thank you, Molly Ivins. They serve as kind of a smoke screen where people get so scared of them that they think, well, things could be worse, so we better rally behind our fuzzy-wuzzy, yuppie alleged liberals like Bill Clinton and Dianne Feinstein and Willie Brown and Albert Gore and people like that. I mean, granted, Clinton may yet go down in history as one of the most crooked presidents ever, but not for any of the reasons that are trumpeted in the corporate press. I mean, Monica's magic orifice makes great Jerry Springer type news and stuff. Seems to me if it's really that important, maybe the way to solve it would be to have a national coloring contest where you could have an outline of a male weenie, and then whoever colors it in closest to the president's alleged distinguishing characteristics gets to give him a blowjob live on Larry King, and then we can move on. Or maybe Ice-T had an even better idea. Put them all on Jerry Springer. Clinton and his hoes out in the room. And then Hillary comes on and beats them all up. But seeing as how that Reagan and Bush got away with Contragate, drug running, assassinations, killing 5,000 people in Panama, keeping the hostages in Iran until after Reagan beat Carter in the election, letting savings and loan crooks run off with billions of dollars that we wind up paying for, All of those are impeachable offenses. I mean, if Clinton goes down just because of his dick compared to what they got away with, we really are living in the fall of Rome. We really are. As far as I'm concerned, the real reasons to impeach Clinton and every single creature around him holding public office of either party, at a time when there isn't really much difference between the two parties. We're basically like Mexico now. Instead of the PRI being a one-party state complete with its own death squads, in this country we have a one-party state, the corporate party, masquerading as a two-party state where they prepare to fight over little things and then magically agree behind everybody's back when it's time to throw kids in wheelchairs out in the street or bash immigrants or give tax breaks to the rich or something like that. There seems to be very little debate on the matter. As far as I'm concerned, Clinton's real crimes are the way he's basically letting Wall Street run the whole goddamn country. What's ever good for global corporations must be good for everyone else. And being a supposed opponent of this as a Democrat and everything, it makes it easier for the corporate regime to get away with things that people would have fought harder if it was coming out of the fang-dripping mouth of George Bush. I mean, they knew people were sick of him and didn't want his face on TV every night anymore, so they gave a fuzzy-wuzzy yuppie face instead, who feels our pain as he inflicts more and more of it. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, gutting the welfare system ought to be an impeachable crime. When that went through, and the crime bill went through, and the anti-immigrant bill went through, it's almost as if the Clintonoids and the Newtsies were dancing Ring Around the Rosie in the halls of the Capitol building, singing what is obviously our national anthem in their eyes: kill, 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 kill the poor, kill, 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 kill the poor. Watergate-style dirty tricks have gone up as well. In '96, according to, I believe it was either the Progressive or the Nation, reported the government admitted to 839 wiretaps, up 20% from the year before. And in 1993, the FBI at least admitted to 300 break-ins, 6 times the last available statistic on that, which was 85 under Reagan. And Clinton's drug war budget is triple Reagan's last drug war budget. It's almost as though the arms race has shifted from the Soviet Union to a war on the American people. Instead of the military-industrial complex, we have the prison-industrial complex. At a time when they can't even come up with a scarier big bad wolf than Saddam Hussein and North Korea, the arms race goes up anyway. They talk about the Clinton telephone scandal. The real telephone scandal is when he calls up from the White House offices to lobby foreign countries to buy more American weapons. There he is as the chief executive of the land, lobbying for private corporations to make them more money. Instead of a Cold War, it's all about more and more dollars now, where the State Department itself is actively involved in closing arms deals with dictators and oil sheiks and foreign countries and all. And even embassy employees are graded on their ability to market American goods. The CIA is now authorized to do industrial spying on behalf of American corporations. And in a move not even George Bush could stomach, Clinton lifted a ban on selling really high-tech, badass military hardware like fighter planes and tanks and stuff to countries in Latin America with dismal human rights records over the years. 50 million just got handed to the Colombian death squads under the claim that it was to fight drugs. The usual excuse. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, The real reason to impeach these people is this whole attitude of sell everything, privatize. Better yet, we're giving it away. National parks, we're giving them away, starting with the Presidio in San Francisco. And the privatizing mania has trickled all the way down to local levels too, like the state of Texas, until people got wind of it and moved to stop it, was going to turn the operation of their entire welfare system over to Lockheed. Of course, the profit motive in a private company running the welfare system is to kick as many people off as possible and pocket the money. That's why Lockheed was interested to begin with. Meanwhile, our previous mayor, Frank Jordan, spearheaded the move to privatize the San Francisco Zoo, whereby it was sold to a private consortium for $1. After all, private enterprise can always run things more efficiently and better than government, right? Well, no. 2 years later, the zoo was already $4 million in debt, although salaries of the people running it were higher than ever before, as zookeepers themselves were being laid off. So to make up the $4 million, there was a ballot initiative last election, the same one where they rammed through that stadium for the 49ers. Yeah. Anyway, also on the ballot, you may have noticed posters around town with cute little greeting card kitty drawings of bears and things. Save the zoo. Who could say no to saving the zoo? So, of course, it passed by a huge margin, with people actually not bothering to look that they were just handing more government money to a private company that should never be running the zoo in the first place, because after all, if you take the government money away, they'll run it better. Ha, 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 ha. Based on the success of privatizing the zoo, Willie Brown's people are now floating the idea of handing Golden Gate Park over to Levi's. Keeping in mind what happens if you privatize a park like Golden Gate Park, that would also mean Levi's would be able to hire their own police force. And laws against bashing homeless would not necessarily apply to private security guards the way they do the San Francisco Police Department. So privatization can be very, very dangerous. Back to the sell everything, we're giving it away mentality of the Clintonoids and the Newtsies. You know, they're talking about drilling for oil all over Alaska, which has been blocked for years, and then shipping all the oil to Japan and even to China rather than sending it down here. They'll cry energy crisis if they have to get this through, but the oil is actually going to go somewhere else. And quietly, the Clinton people put through a law whereby there was a 7-year statute on oil royalties that oil companies have to pay for the already rock-bottom fees for drilling on government-owned land. And that may not seem like much, but if you go clear back to 78, from 78 to 1983, according to the Progressive, oil companies owed the state of California alone $856 million. That's just up to 83 in one state. That's how much of a corporate giveaway this is, and the real reason Clinton and Gore should be behind bars. They've also revived a toxic, no pun intended, idea of the Bush administration to allow industries to sell pollution credits to each other, whereby it's the grand total of the pollution that they'll measure. They'll measure how legal the pollution is instead of going after each company. So if one company pollutes less than their quota, they can sell the rest of the pollution allotment, you know, how much they're allowed to poison us and everything, to some other company who can then pollute more. The Clintonoids want this applied on a global scale through the GATT Treaty and the upcoming Multilateral Agreement on Investment Treaty that I'll get to in a minute here. They're also starting to give away military bases. In one case, the German Luftwaffe is renting out Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico and practicing in our country. The ultimate goal is to have 1,000 German airmen down there doing who knows what. They also had the bright idea to privatize meat inspection. Get the government off those poor slaughterhouses' backs. E. coli, who cares? The industry can inspect themselves now. They can do a better job. Ho, ho, ho. And they also quietly gutted an obscure law known as the Delaney Clause, which dates back to the 50s. Again, not even Reagan and Bush were corrupt enough to do this. This says no traces of carcinogens, cancer-causing agents, allowed in foods sold in this country. Now, instead, the industry gets to take it product by product and decide the risk assessment, as they put it. You know, is there enough in here that we're going to get sued by so many people for killing them that we won't make enough money or not? That's risk assessment, and that's what they've decided to do with the food industry now. Some of you may know they recently tried to destroy the organic food laws, too, and make a new one whereby the stuff that was fertilized with toxic sludge or kept in factory farms or genetically engineered could all be sold as organic food. There was enough public outcry that they withdrew that, proving that making nice crank calls to the agriculture department or whoever and actually public lobbying from the grassroots up can work still. Another gift from the Clintonoids was to yank away Medicare for people who test HIV positive. Only if you have full-blown AIDS will we give you any money. Until you get to the point where we know you're going to die, we won't save your life. We have to spend it on the Pentagon or stealth bombers or something instead. And the latest proposal from both the Clintonoids and the Newtsies is to get rid of Social Security too. Privatize it, invest it in the stock market. If the whole thing disappears like Orange County's money did in the stock market, well, too bad. We'll all be with Jesus by then anyway. But I think most criminal of all, and the number one reason that Clinton and Gore should be impeached, as well as every single member of Congress who was in on this, was they gave away the airwaves. In other countries, the airwaves are publicly owned, and TV and radio broadcasters pay very large fees for the right to use them. Not here. The Telecommunications Act of 1996 did get a little bit of media coverage, mainly because of a clause in there that didn't seem to bother alleged liberal Clinton one bit of banning naughty words on the internet and making the law so strict against explicit sexual content that you couldn't even learn how to prevent pregnancy or AIDS on the net. The Supreme Court, thankfully, threw this out by a unanimous vote. I guess Clarence Thomas for once looked into his soul and realized that he couldn't get any more porno on his computer if that one went through. They gave away the airwaves. The new digital spectrum for high-definition TV and interactive TV and all that, that's a whole new spectrum of airwaves. Even Robert Dole called it corporate welfare and refused to support it, but once he resigned from the Senate, it went right through. Ralph Nader's Public Citizen group estimates that the amount of money the broadcasters are going to save by not having to pay for what the people own is at a minimum of between $20 and $100 billion. That's the size of this crime going on here. They've said that there are going to be a few other slots available that haven't been handed to multinationals that people can buy through auctions, and that there will be a few little slots open for public broadcasting, and among those invited to bid on those slots are religious broadcasters who get their money tax-free. And that's their Clintonoids' idea of public television. Hand it to Pat Robertson. And this law ended the restrictions on the number of radio and TV stations one person or corporate entity can own in one community. Meaning slowly but surely, Rupert Murdoch or Mickey Mouse could buy up every damn one in this town and run all of them. Under this law, that is now legal. What we have now is not capitalism, it is feudalism. New feudalism, where the barons and lords and high castles are the Shell Oils, Exxons, Bill Gatesoids, etc. And every time we go out and buy one of their products, we are their serfs. And it's a little hard to be completely pure and correct about that unless you're Ted Kaczynski. The NAFTA treaty I mentioned earlier is just proving to be a windfall for people who already have more money than they know what to do with, while providing no benefits to anybody else, and in fact hurting a lot of other people instead. This is the North American Free Trade Agreement between America, Canada, and Mexico. It's really gutted a lot of Canada's economy, and a lot of native products can't get on the shelves anymore because they're being undercut by the stuff made by the multinationals down here. Meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of jobs have disappeared from America and gone over to Mexico. And meanwhile, in the interest of free trade, they no longer check credentials at the border of things like Mexican truck drivers or the kind of gas they're using polluting the air or anything. And the accident rate in southern Texas has gone way, way up for semi-trucks. And oftentimes, when they dig people out of the wreckage, the driver is 14 or 15 years old and doesn't have a license. But hey, you can't get strict on that because after all, free trade is much more important than human beings. Even in Mexico, income is down and unemployment has gone way, way, way up. Many people who've farmed for generations are being forced to abandon their land and live homeless in the cities because they can't very well grow corn down there and try to compete with Archer Daniels Midland or whoever who's now flooding Mexico with cheap corn from Iowa and Nebraska and Kansas, things like that. In some cases, this is probably going to lead to a rise in people converting that land into poppy and marijuana fields just in time to increase the drug war budget against Mexico. We already gave them 50 attack helicopters last year, saying that it was all to fight drugs, but of course what it's really for is to try and kill off the Chiapas guerrillas and the Zapatistas and things. There's also the number of maquiladora factories south of the American border, across the border from Texas. Mexico continues to grow where there's no pollution laws like they have on our side of the border, and people work there for next to nothing, of course. And there's so much pollution coming out of those factories that now in Brownsville and McAllen, Texas, there's an epidemic of horrific birth defects. And in El Paso, there's even been reports of cholera, along with tuberculosis, which has also been reported in New York and LA. This works so well for billionaires and multinationals and the like that they've decided the whole world needs to be run this way as well. And already in place is the GATT Treaty, General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, another good reason to impeach Clinton. It's kind of NAFTAizing the entire world, where what corporations want is far more important than anybody's local laws, sovereignty, or democracy. And the end-all organization that can nuke your own law with bolts of lightning from clear across the world is called the World Trade Organization, the WTO, where any member who signed on to the GATT Treaty can challenge any other country's laws as a barrier to free trade and take their complaint to the WTO, who are 3 anonymous bureaucrats and chemical company executives headquartered in Geneva. Their hearings are secret, their documents are secret, their decisions are kept secret on purpose by corporate media. For example, the first WTO decision was to gut the American Clean Air Act after Brazil and Venezuela complained that they couldn't sell dirty gasoline up here anymore. And so the WTO threatened America with $150 million in sanctions and fines. So the Clinton people very quietly announced, well, so we don't get fined, we're simply not going to enforce the Clean Air Act anymore. Gone, without any public debate whatsoever. Mexico complained to the WTO that our ban on tuna caught in those big gill nets that kills all these other fish and dolphins and everything, we have a ban on that in this country, thus the dolphin safe tuna logo and everything. Well, that's been nuked by the WTO as a barrier to free trade. Even if we wind up wiping out so much life in the ocean that we starve ourselves to death, free trade is much more important. And in this case, Vice President Gore spearheaded a new law to replace the old one, whereby we will now go back to allowing all kinds of tuna caught in gill nets into this country, but if the corporations want to put dolphin safe on the cans anyway to fool the public, they can. And that is the solution. Oh, here's a good one too, is we've also challenged other countries' laws under the WTO. For example, the near continent-wide ban in European countries against American beef because of bovine growth hormone. They don't want their people getting stuck with frankenfood over there. But going to bat for the frankenfood industry, of course, are the Clintonoids who are claiming that this is a barrier to free trade and you have to let this tainted stuff into your country and not tell anybody about it. And NAFTA is working so well in their eyes that they're trying to extend it now to Chile and Brazil, and I think Argentina is the other one. And before Monica Mania happened, you'll recall there was all this hoopla about Clinton going down on a trip to South America. But what they didn't tell you is when he got to Brazil, I think this was in Rio de Janeiro, his limousine was pelted by farm animal manure brought in by farmers who don't want to lose their livelihoods if NAFTA turns into SAFTA. Boy, would I like to get my hands on video footage of that. Such a fitting projectile for the man, too.